Hi, Jason.
Hey,
Welcome to Bible/Chat. We're talking about a whole host of things. One of the things we just did one on pastoral plagiarism, but we had been talking about prayer for a number of different ones, and so maybe at least one more, a couple more to wrap up prayer.
absolutely. So we've covered seven, I think. So this one is very, very specific to a text at least, and it's from Romans 8,
Yeah,
where it talks about the Holy Spirit praying really like our prayers, right?
yeah,
Let me get the verse right. Sorry. Romans 8:26
yep,
talks about in the same way the Spirit also helps our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we should, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And he goes on to talk about the Father and the Spirit's
yeah.
relationship. So, what does that mean? Two groanings too deep for words? Are
Yeah.
those are His groanings? Do we hear it? What's going on there?
Yeah, good. Yeah, that this text gets a lot of is a lot of is has a lot of confusion around it. People use it, that phrase "groanings too deep for words" to talk about like private prayer languages, things that are like heart languages that we can then pray that are too deep for words. But what's fascinating here is that it's not us that are praying; it's the Spirit that's praying.
Mhm.
And the Spirit is praying for us because of our weakness. We actually don't know how to pray, and so the Spirit prays on our behalf. Now, this is interesting. It doesn't say the Spirit prays through us or that we are praying or groaning the groanings of the
Yeah,
Spirit, but
yeah,
it says
yeah.
that the Spirit is groaning uh, on our behalf because of our weakness and our inability to even know how to pray. So what Paul here is saying is effectively, I think, what he's communicating is that what's happening here is that we don't know how to pray for specific things. And I think that's even like personal life realities, right? In verse 28, he's going to tell us God works all things together for good. So our own circumstances, our own life, our own needs, our own requests. We don't know how to pray rightly because we are broken people. We're sinful people. So we would pray for maybe a trial to be taken away, or we might pray for help or blessing or whatever. And God knows, actually, according to verse 27, what's best for us, right?
Wow.
He knows what is best for us. And the Spirit who's dwelling inside of us knows our temptations and our struggles and what will best serve to bring us into conformity into the image of Christ, which is what is the goal of all of our suffering, right? In verse 29, and goal of all of our circumstances of life. And so God knows what's best for us. He wants us conformed to the image of Christ. He knows our temptation and our weakness is our propensity to want to pray things that aren't even right. And so, because of that, the Spirit comes in and intercedes on our behalf. So now the Spirit is praying on our behalf, not through us, but praying to the Father for us,
Right.
right? And so the Spirit is aware of my weakness. He knows my failings, and He now prays to the Father and intercedes on my behalf according to God's will. So God knows the mind of the Spirit, it says in verse 27. He who
Right.
searches the hearts, that's God the Father, knows what the mind of the Spirit is because He intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. So the Spirit knows my weakness because He's in me, and God's will is going to be best for those weaknesses to be purified so that I'm conformed to the image of Christ. And so what happens is the Spirit prays to the Father on my behalf for what is best for me, so that everything will work together for my good, so that I'll be conformed to the image of Christ. Well, what's happening there? Well, my prayers are fleshly, can be fleshly at times, right? And I'm not always sure about what's best to pray because of my weakness. The Spirit, though, is never fleshly. He's always praying according to God's will on my behalf. And so he's always uttering before God the things that I need most, that are best for me. And so he's lifting up my soul and praying for me, interceding on my behalf between myself and the Father, so that God is hearing from him and so that God's will is being worked out in my life. And that all of that is coming together, working together for my good, so that I would be conformed to the image of Christ. So that prayer there is not necessarily a prayer like me praying or me groaning or me doing anything. It's actually a Trinitarian reality, right? The Spirit of God that dwells inside of me is praying to the Father because of the finished work of Christ on my soul, that those three things working together will conform me into the image of Christ so that I would be more like him. And that's the end goal of everything in my life, every circumstance in my life, every providence that comes together in my life is for those things so that I would be conformed to his image. And for that reason, the Spirit works. He helps me in my weakness so that I will achieve that goal ultimately through the will of God the Father being carried out in my life. So the prayer there is actually God praying to himself on my behalf to protect me, to keep me.
Yeah.
That makes
It's
sense.
an intra-Trinitarian thing going on there, and we have no active participation in it,
Yeah.
right?
We're
Which
just
is really
happy recipients, right? We're happy recipients that God is working that stuff together. Even in suffering, even through pain, God is working all those things together so that we're conformed
awesome.
into the image of God, of Christ.
He prays for us so that we would be conformed by God to the end of glorification, all of which is his work, zero us.
Yeah, exactly.
And specifically with the prayer in 26. So no private prayer language,
Yeah.
heart groanings. It's things that we cannot hear, obviously, because the Holy Spirit is doing it out.
Yeah.
It's not doing it in us or through
Yeah,
us. It's not some mystical language.
totally.
Holy Spirit praying to the Father on our
Yeah.
behalf.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that reality of what's taking place there is just the Spirit of God working in us, through us, on our behalf, praying to God the Father for the sake of God's will to be carried out in our lives and our conformity to the image of Christ, ultimately. And yeah, that it's a tricky text, right? It's a very tricky text, and you can see how people could get confused by it.
Of course. Yeah.
But yeah, nothing in us, nothing that we're doing, no active praying on our part, but just God's work in us and for us.
Which really makes us like, which makes prayer actually then less burdensome and less like, yeah, it's not about us. It just gives a lot of comfort and hope because, even when you don't know what to pray, how to pray,
Yeah,
you're covered. You're always, it never says here like the Spirit will only pray for you when or
if
if.
you're doing, yeah, if you're doing the right thing, yeah, it's the opposite. You're weak, you don't know, but the Spirit is strong, and He knows, and so He's going to pray on your behalf.
That's such a comfort. That's a great encouragement to pray. I think we tend to take prayer into our own hands and make it, something that we got to just muster up and we got to do. And if we don't keep persevering and pray without ceasing, then the world's gonna
Yeah,
fall.
totally, exactly. Good.
Thanks, man.
Good.
That's so helpful.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Well, thank you for watching or for listening. And if you have any questions, as always, feel free to comment in the comment box below.